everyone. Welcome back to another tutorial today. I'm Mick Taylor, and today we are going to cover how you can utilize Azure DevOps pipelines. You can use Azure DevOps test plans and product boards all together with the UiPath Test Suite to create reusable, robust tests that help you test out your applications. What we're going to cover today is application testing. Now, this scenario is when you are wanting to be able to test an application outside of UiPath. So say maybe a banking web app or a banking desktop app, maybe even a green screen application. Whatever it is, as long as you are able to access elements on a screen, then we're going to be able to test that out using UiPath robots. Now, what makes this tutorial interesting for a lot of you folks is going to be that you're going to be able to now connect this to an Azure DevOps release pipeline. So this pipeline is going to kick off anytime you make updates to some source code. Now, the first thing that I want to show you guys today is just, the use case that we're going to be looking at. So we're going to imagine that we have a development team put together. We have some Angular developers that are building this UiBank web app. We also have a team of backend developers that have put together a database. They've built an application on Spring. They're using Java. This is all connected together to create, an enterprise application that we call the UiBank that allows people to do a variety of different things. Now, you can do things such as log in, you can apply for an account, you can open and close checkings and savings accounts, transfer money between the accounts, etc. Now, we've also got a QA team, and I'm the QA lead on that team. And what I want to do is I want to make it so that my team doesn't have to manually test out each one of those use cases. Now, I've seen some other teams out there, and what ends up happening is, they create these automated tests, whether it's in UiPath, testing, in the test suite, or whether it's in Selenium. So if it's in Selenium or any of the other frameworks out there, you might write out your test cases. And then what happens is you go and execute those tests. So execute the tests, the tester looks at the results, they gather all the results, they take a screenshot of what happened. If there's a failure, they send it to their developer saying, hey, something went wrong. Now we need to go, do some changes on that code. Now, what we want to do is anytime that there's any code changes from either one of the front-end Angular developers or one of the back-end Java Spring developers, what we want to do is we want to have our tests automatically run on their code that they've just committed, and then test out the functionality so that we know instantly whether their changes have broken something or whether, we need to update the code or whether we need to update the test cases to be valid test cases going forward. So with that being said, let's go and take a look at our test cases that we have here. So first thing that you're going to see is UiPath Studio. So this is our development environment. If you've looked at any of the other tutorials within the Test Suite playlist, you'll be able to see, a more in-depth tutorial on how to create test cases. But what we're going to look at is we're just going to first look at, how we can create a simple test case here. So this test case that I've got here, I created this one. We've got some reusable components. So for instance, I've got this one XAML right here, and this one is just to log in. So we provide it some parameters. It goes in, checks to see if it's logged, if it hasn't been logged out. If it hasn't been logged out, we're going to log it out just so that we can, deal with that scenario where, somebody might be already logged in. We just want to test that you can log in successfully. We get the sign in, and then from there, we're going to check to see that we get a success message. So at the end of every one of our steps, what we do is we tell it that we want to verify that we find the log out button, and we also want to verify that there are no new, or there or no accounts at this time for this new account that we created. So we're going to create an account using an API. We're going to go verify that account using Mailinator. So Mailinator is just how we're going to go and generate some new accounts. And then, we're going to verify that we've logged in, that we log out, and that everything is all successful. Then we also want to have a negative test case. So we want to test out to make sure that when we try to log in with an account, when we have already, or we have not verified that account on Mailinator. So you guys have all probably had created an account where you have to go to your email, verify the account, and then it's, open to be logged in. We have the same thing with the UI Bank. You have to verify the account before you can log in. That's what we're going to do here. And then finally, excuse me. Finally, the last test case that we're going to look at is we're going to verify that we can create a transaction. So what we're going to create an account via an API. We're going to even do this in a data-driven approach. So I can show you how, some of these activities here that we've used. So we're going to generate a given name and a last name, and then we're going to provide that to Mailinator to verify that account. We're going to create the account via an API. All of these test cases are all going to be run one after another to create a single test case. So for this circumstance, what I do is I just publish my test case directly to Orchestrator. And once I have published my test case to Orchestrator, what I need to do is I need to go to my automations. I need to create an automation within Orchestrator. Then I need to go to testing, and then I create a new test set based on that automation. Now we could go and set this up on a test schedule. So we could just, add a schedule and run these things on, whether we want to run it every week, or maybe we want to run it every second Tuesday of the month. All of this can be done within Orchestrator. But that's not really what we're interested in here. What we are interested in is being able to run this anytime we make code changes. Here is our web app. It doesn't have any changes just yet. And once we make a commit, that's what's going to trigger that pipeline to run. Now, prior to running our pipeline, we are going to need to do a bit of setup for our Azure DevOps pipelines, as well as the product board. So let me just show you how you do that now. The first thing that you're going to do is you're going to go down to your project settings, and you're going to go and check on your service connections. For the service connection and for your test manager connection, you're going to need to add an activity here. We do have documentation on the UiPath website where you can go learn how to make one of those connections between your orchestrator for the pipelines, and then also test manager for your product boards. So for the pipelines, you'll do a service connection. You're going to create a connection to your environment. For a lot of our folks, the way that they do this is that they'll have, one service connection per environment. So whether it's dev, UAT, prod, they're going to create a service connection into those 3 different orchestrators. So then you can tell it to, run some robots, or to, add a new automation into there via one of the pipelines. So that's the purpose of there. You'll create a few different service connections for your different orchestrator tenants. Okay. The next thing that we're going to take a look at is we're going to take a look at test manager connection. Now, this is for the product boards and the test plans portion of Azure DevOps. So what we're looking at here is you're going to have a server URL. So this is going to go to your test manager instance. So I'm going to blur some of this out, but you'll be able to see right here, the last part here is the test manager ending of your orchestrator. So make sure you use that. And then you'll go and get an API key, and you can tell it that you want to manage your tests within Azure DevOps. What this means is that when you go and create a test within Azure DevOps, it's going to create one, then, essentially a copy that's synced up with Test Manager, so that you can essentially do all of your work in Azure DevOps product boards and test plans. Now, one thing that we do need to note is that we need to select a requirement type that is going to be tied to a requirement in Test Manager. So let's go take a look at Test Manager here. Now, when we make a connection, we would go and click edit or a new connection. We could just give it a name here, a description. These don't really matter. Then we'll do a server URL. This is to the URL that you have in your Azure DevOps. So if we go to our settings here, you'll see that mine is dev.azure/UiBank. For yours, it would be, whatever your instance is named. So let's go back to the project. We would just grab a personal access token, and then, we would make that connection. We'd also need to set what the project name is and the defect type that we're going to use. Okay. So it's pretty simple to make that connection. We just got to make sure that we have all the things, tied up correctly. If they're not working right, you might just need to play around with it a bit. Okay. So moving on, once we have all of those connections made, we're going to go over to our pipelines, and we're going to take a look at one of the release pipelines that I've created here. So you can see that my last test that I did, everything ran successfully in development, ran successfully in testing, but prior to getting into production, we had an issue. So that meant that release was not going to make it into production yet. We're going to have to redo a testing cycle to make sure that we get everything working. So let's just take a look at how I created this workflow. So what we did is we have an artifact here. This is going to be pointed to our UiBank web app, the front end and back end. This is a repository that we have hosted in this repo over here. This is not the same repo as our test cases. This is for an actual artifact of the application that you're going to test. Okay. And then we have a couple stages. So here's a couple just command line activities that I had written so that it will go and deploy the web front end and then the back end. And then after it's deployed that new code, then it's going to go into our orchestrator. It's going to say, hey, orchestrator, go and run this test set that I've created. So here's our test set, UiBank E2E demo, and it's in this folder that I have specified. So if we go and take a look back at orchestrator, you can see that if we go to our test set, we can see UiBank E2E demo. This is what is going to be executed by our robot. And I've got a robot hosted on an Azure virtual machine. So here's my Azure virtual machine. I have, I've created it so that it will run my robot for me. It's got a UiPath testing robot running on it. And anytime that I need to run some test cases, then I've got this robot as well as my second VM here available for me to run test cases. Okay. So that's really kind of the full picture of everything that I have set up here. All right, so now that we've reviewed how we can set up our connections between Test Manager and our orchestrator and our Azure DevOps pipelines, Azure DevOps product boards, how about we go and take a look at what we're doing with product boards. So what we've got here is we've got a test case or some work items here. So here is, create a user. We also want to be able to, print an account summary. And then from there, we've got our test plans, which assert those work items that we've created. So if you go and view all of our runs in the past, then you can see, where we ran things and, what they did when those test cases actually ran. So we'll be able to view the results, view the screenshots of everything that happened anytime you run one of those test cases. So now we're going to imagine that we've got a team and, our front-end developers and our back-end developers, they've made some changes to their web app. They're ready to go check in some code. So they go in, they take their Java code, their JavaScript code, they push it up into Git, our Git repository, which is hosted on Microsoft Azure DevOps. Now, just to simulate this, all that we're going to do is we are just going to add a period onto this README. We'll just act like, we have actually added some code, but if you were to make any code changes, then this is kind of what it would look like. So we make some code changes, we right click here, we do a git commit, and we're just going to say, commit to the README file, and then we're going to commit and push. This is just going to push our code into Microsoft Azure DevOps, into Git, and then we'll go and view this repo. We'll be able to see, we just made some changes right there. And now if we go to our pipelines and our releases, we go to this release here, we'll be able to see now that this release has been kicked off. We've gone and created an artifact of that code that was checked into GitHub repository. So that's done right here on the left. This artifact essentially triggers this next stage right here in this release pipeline that we've told it now we want to be able to go and test things out. So let's just go take one more look over at our pipeline just to see kind of how it's been constructed. Each one of these stages are essentially the same. They're just pointing to different orchestrators. So the development one goes to development orchestrator, testing, production, etc. And you can also just inject a variable in there. So if you want it to give it a argument of a development, then you can do that within the stage and the tasks that you have. I've just created these command line activities to go and create my build activities for my front end web app and my back end web app, and then I've got my testing stages here. Set it up to look for this test set within this folder in Orchestrator. So if we go and we look at this test set now, and here's our test set, we can go view the testing execution, which was automatically kicked off by our check-in, which triggered the pipeline to kick off those tests. So we've had one of our test cases pass already. Second test case just passed now. And now how about we go and take a look at the robot running these tests in the background. So we're just going to shift over. We're going to look at this robot run, and then we'll come back to the Azure DevOps pipeline to finish things up and to look at what our next steps would be. All right, so now we can see that all of our test cases passed, and then we can also go and view in Azure DevOps Pipeline. So here's our release, and we can see that the deployment succeeded, and we had 100% test rate. We can go and view the logs here. So if we went to pipelines, then we can go back to our releases. So then from here, we just go and approve it. So I'm the QA, the lead QA person. I'm also going to need my project manager to go and approve this code to go into the next environment too. So we'd say approved, viewed the execution results. So this keeps everyone honest. The QA person needs to go and view all the results, make sure that everything looks good to go into the next environment. This is the one manual step that they do have to do, is just do a quick review of everything. They hit approve, and then once they've approved everything, now it's going to start moving into the next environment. So we'll be able to see now, everything is going to be moving on to the next environment. I just had an email come to my inbox that, things were moving into the next environment. My project manager also got an email, as well as the entire dev team all got notifications that things are moving along, and everybody is informed of what the status of the project is. Thank you everyone for joining me today on how we integrate UiPath Test Suite into Azure DevOps product boards, test plans, pipelines all together into one seamless suite of tools so that you can have automated tests from end to end and really reduce the amount of work that you guys are doing on reporting results back and forth. My name is Mick Taylor, and I hope to see you again next time. Bye.